Alrighty. Sorry I was tardy. I thought, well, at least let me get the camera on the reef. So how are y'all? I lost my focus in the background. Oh, let me change that. You guys know I like it better in the back. Let's see. Change that. And maybe bump this up. Oh, can't do this. Oh, hang on. I can do that. Almost forgot that. That was important. Now you can see a little bit better. We'll leave it there. All right, now. Does the background focus? No, it doesn't. Oh, it's too picky. All right, well, let's just move on. I wanted to welcome you to this weekend's live stream. We do this every single week where we talk about something that has to do with the reef. But I have to tell you that next weekend there will not be a live stream because I won't be anywhere near this house. So I just want to give you a heads up. You get a weekend off. Go shopping, buy gifts for everyone for Christmas so you're prepared. Yeah. I want to talk about Black Friday for a minute. Now, what you're probably thinking is, oh, he's going to give us a whole list of things we can buy that are on sale this weekend. No, I actually want to know what you got. that's all I care about. I just want to know what you got because I'm very curious what you went looking for. I, like usual, kind of miss these opportunities and don't think about it until it's too late. And then I'm kind of like looking at ads really quickly and I'm like, oh, forget it. I did go to Best Buy yesterday looking for a new television to put in the studio so that when I'm building things and gluing things, I have entertainment. And of course, what I want is much too expensive, like usual. And it's on sale this weekend all the way through Cyber Monday. So I do have options to, cave in and buy it still before it's too late. But, I mean, I was debating between a Sony and a Samsung and it's like $1,800 for what I want. And, it's 120 hertz. Of course, it's got to be the best. So it'll look fantastic when I'm watching National Geographic videos and things like that. Because I stream a lot to my work area. And, I always have it on Disney Plus, Netflix, whatever. And a lot of aquarium stuff is on my screen. Sometimes I just run YouTube nonstop. So I've always got something going on that has to do with this hobby because I'm a little bit immersed. And that's just how I am. So, yeah, it's a lot of money. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of want to spoil myself, but I continually seem to be doing that. I need to rein it in and be a little bit better about that. So let's, I'm looking at all these comments from people. Brian, you literally were first. Good job. I'm going to put this here so everyone knows. You were the first one. And Reef with me, so close. So, Paul says, not first. That's funny. So I ended up visiting with my family for the last 2 days. I went down to a town 2 hours south of here to spend time with my son, his wife, my grandson. And then my son has a birthday on Tuesday. And so I wanted to kind of bundle that into this trip for him. And so we went shopping yesterday and I went and got him a nice gift for his, he wanted basically a really nice toolbox with a wooden top on the top that can store all of his tools. When he's working on his car, he can bring it near the car and it's loaded with everything. And So I picked him up that, as well as some pouches to wear around your hips, so that when you are doing a project, you have all these little pockets to put things in, because that's how I do things when I do construction or building or hanging pictures or whatever it is. I grab the tool belt, and it just keeps everything within reach. It's a lot easier than, I don't know, put things in your pockets and put things down and go get them again. If they're right on your hip, you can just grab it. So I prefer to do that as much as possible. Now, the live stream today is really going to be Q&A. It's going to be what you guys would like to talk about this weekend, because I didn't have a topic specifically in mind. I did look at what we've been discussing over the last year, and I also noticed that we have had 190 live streams on this channel so far. That is a lot. We're coming up on 200, and that's kind of a big deal. We should, I don't know. Wouldn't it be funny if, I mean, it's not possible, but wouldn't it be funny if I could somehow master it in time to have the 200th episode be where I'm interviewing me on a live stream? See, I can't do it. It's impossible. But it would be fun. It was just like, so tell us about what you were thinking. And then I'd respond, you know. It would be kind of, I've actually never tried to figure out how to do that thing where you green screen and you put both yourselves in one video. And I'm always impressed by others that do that so well. And it's kind of one of those things I've always thought would be fun. I also thought of a crazy series idea for how to help someone fix their tank up with me as their mentor. And I had this nutty video approach that I thought would be kind of fun to do. So who knows, maybe that'll happen next year. We'll find out. Hey, I do want to mention that we still need to keep being safe. And I know some people literally have no qualms whatsoever. They're just living their lives and they believe that nothing's going to happen. And then there's others that are paralyzed with fear. I'm kind of in that middle where I want to be cautious, but I want to continue to live. I feel like the first year of COVID, I was super cautious, probably even longer. And I've let my guard down just a little bit this year. So I, you know, I went to a football game where there was tons of people, and I thought that was such a terrible decision. And I'm so glad I came out of there without catching or getting sick. And then I went to Aquashella, which was a smaller environment, way less people, but still a lot of people, a lot of strangers, and no issues. And then, of course, I just did this family thing over the weekend, or I'm sorry, earlier this week, and got to enjoy some time with, you know, 10 people or so. So, you know, it's still, I think we should keep our guard up. And the reason I say that is because, you know, if you watch the news, it can be depressing, but you will hear things like it's surging, or, you know, it's, you know, because everyone's getting together, everyone's being not cautious, they the numbers will rise again, and they probably will. I mean, it's just, it is what it is. When you have groups of people coming together, there's more chance than when you're literally going to work and coming home and buying groceries and coming home. But fighting your way through the pile of Xboxes at Best Buy during Black Friday would have been, you know, more risky. If you can picture that one in your mind. So yeah, let's see if we can find ourselves a question here. And I'm going to try to be better today about keeping up with the chat. And that way it won't be like you ask a question and 20 minutes later I get to you. Reef with me says he's on his way to the LFS now with 50% off of livestock, looking for acans and scolemia. Nice choices. That sounds really great. I kind of still want a scolie. Someone asked me recently, how come I don't have a clam in my tank? I just haven't had any clams in years. I did put one in my anemone cube. That was in there. That was years ago. And, you know, 4 years ago, something like that. And it did fine for a good long time. And that was back when I had the eels in there. And then one day, after living with this clam for a long time, the eel ate the clam. And that was the end of that. And I've been thinking, well, it'd be nice to put a clam in this tank now. And I may do it. But I'm wondering if the copperband will become a problem. Or if the copperband will get injured being a problem. So I don't know. If you've had a copperband, you know, I'd love to know in the comments. Or if you're watching this after the stream is over. If you had an experience with a copperband with like Maxima clams, I'd love to hear what you were aware of, what you saw. You know, what's your personal experience? Jamie suggested, you know, Samsung, Sony, but LG is the best screen, and you get way more money for your hard-earned, you know, way more for your hard-earned money. You know, LG is also on the list. So what I was doing, the new building has these metal like cleats, or I don't know what they're called, trusses or something, that literally come out of the wall and go up to the roof. And the distance between them is 57 inches right now as their bare metal. If I wrap them with sheetrock, the distance becomes, 56 inches between them. So remember, 57 is where it is right now. And all the TVs I like are 57 and a quarter. It's like, it's not like I can just whittle off 1/8 of an inch off each end of the TV and just leave it exposed. So I looked at some brackets, and those are on sale this weekend too. In case you're not aware, like a normal bracket's $250 at Best Buy is like $112 right now. And it's one that you can actually pull it away from the wall. And if I can do that, I can put the bracket up high, pull it away from the wall enough that the TV doesn't touch those, like I said, those cleats or whatever those things are called. And that way I would be able to put that where I want it and not have it down too low, because I would like to have it up. And then when I'm at my workstations, plural, I can just look up and see what's going on, and it'll be at a good viewing point. But so anyway, when I talked to the salesman, I told him that I was looking at something that fit between 57 inches. And he said a 60-inch TV will fit in there because 60 is diagonal. And, it would actually slide in there. And he had one left, open box, and it was like $800. And, $750, I don't know, something like that. You add tax, it's $800. And I was thinking, yeah, okay, that will fit. I won't have to worry about this at all. And the price isn't horrible. But it was the last one, and it was open box. Someone had opened it. They had returned it. Best Buy had basically inspected it and said it's good to go and you can buy it. And I thought, And I kept looking at this TV up on the wall. And because that one up on the wall was 65 inches, and the one I was going to get was 60, they said it's like that one, but smaller. But he kept pointing at the one under it. And the one under it was bigger. Like the top one was 65. I'm saying all these numbers. It's got to twist your brain into a pretzel. I apologize. So the one on the top, 65 inches. The one I want to buy, 60. The one under it was like 75 inches. And I'm looking at the bottom screen, and they're the exact same image. But the bottom screen, which is bigger, seems less vivid. It just kind of seemed a little more muted. My son and I are looking at it. My son knows a lot about TVs. And, because he's so picky because he's a gamer. And he said, that might just be a setting because it's the same brand. And, just because it's gone a little bit larger, it should not look this different. And so I kept looking at the one on the top. I really like the one on the top. And the salesman said, he finally realized what I was doing, or he came back with information. And he said, that's like a model 60. And that up there is a model 90. You'd be getting the 60. And I'm like, okay. And so he says, it'll look like this screen does. It will not look like that screen. And of course, then I'm all like, well, I don't want it anymore now. I want that one. And so it's one of those things where I see something. My dad told me a long time ago, you have champagne taste on a shoestring budget. Now, my budget's a little bit better than shoestrings this day, but yeah, I tend to lean toward the things I really like, and they tend to be pricey, and it's really, I don't know, I literally have an internal guilt meter that says you shouldn't get this for yourself. You should not buy this. It's too much. No, be reasonable. And sometimes I just kind of squash that down and proceed, and sometimes I will drag my feet. I had still another TV story while we're killing time waiting for your questions. I saw this TV I liked that was at Sam's. This was a long time ago, like at least 10 years ago, maybe longer. And they had it on display, and it was fantastic. It was a plasma TV back then that was considered brand new at the time, and it was gorgeous. And it was like $10,000. And I was like, who can afford a $10,000 TV? That's insane. Most of us are buying one for $600 or $800 and thinking, man, look how much money I just spent. 10 grand. It was like, oh, that's only for the rich of the richest. And of course, it's way up on the rack up high, so you can see it from every corner of the building. And the picture was beautiful. And I was like, man, that is what I want. And I would go visit this TV a lot for a long time. And every time I came in the store, there it was lit up. And then at one point, my son got a job at Sam's. And one day he calls me up and he says, Dad, you need to get up here right now. Just get up here. Hurry up. Just stop whatever you're doing. Just come. He says, that TV you've always wanted, we just took it down, and it's going to be, sold used to whoever wants in the store. And I put it on one of those carts, and I've hidden it in the back of the store. And he did. And so when I got there, I let him know. I don't know. I went and found him. I guess I think this is before cell phones, and we got this TV to the register, and I think it was like maybe I paid $1,200 for it when it was $10,000 originally, and I had that TV for like 5 or 6 years. I mean, it just even when I replaced it eventually with something a little thinner and a little bit larger in the living room, that giant heavy plasma TV hung in the wall in my bedroom for a long time. And then eventually it did fail, and I replaced it with something a little bit more up to date that could do apps and stuff, because that one definitely could not do anything except play whatever a VCR pushed into it, or you know what I mean, coaxial. So I have a habit of not buying something instantly, even when I want it really badly. I will wait it out and dream about it. And if an opportunity comes up and something fantastic falls in my lap, I'm like, all right, let's do this. All right, let's get back to aquarium stuff. Oh, nice. Tyler says he was lucky enough to receive a algae turf scrubber as a gift from BRS from the annual order of RODF. So it was like you were in a contest and they drew your name. That is so cool. Selva asked the question, what are fishies that can be added with the clownfish? Clownfish can tolerate a lot of different fish. They usually aren't, I mean, it depends on the clownfish. There are some that are a little bit more territorial, but clownfish are not like these massive aggressors that kill anything in the tank. It's not like a damselfish where the damsels literally are attacking everything and nothing could be a new tank mate. But, I mean, you could have angelfish in there. You could have hawkfish in there. You could have royal grammas. You can have gobies. You can have blennies. I mean, there's really a lot. What I would not do is put other clownfish with a clownfish. So whatever clownfish you have, hopefully it's a pair. So you have 2 of them and they're kind of friends to each other. And then no more clownfish in that tank. Just put other things in there, other things. And if your tank is big, I mean, I didn't even mention tangs because, you might have been talking about a small tank. We don't put a tang in a small tank. But yeah, you can put pretty much a lot of different fish. And what you can do is you can come to Club Milos Reef, which is a group that I run on Facebook. And you can post your tank and your information, and you can show us what you have. And you can say, these are the fish I'd like, they're on my wish list. And then we can help you pick, and we can help you weed out the ones that are bad choices too. Reefing Medic said, I just got my booster on Friday. Has been an uptick of sick people. Yeah, I wanted to get my booster last Monday. And I thought, okay, if I end up feeling a little sick after that, it'll kind of mess up Thanksgiving. So I thought, I can do it next Monday, in 2 days. And then I'm getting on a plane on Tuesday. What if I'm feeling sick from the booster? And what if they won't even let me on the plane? So I thought, I guess I'll just have to wait till I come back. But as soon as I come back, I'm definitely getting the booster because I'd rather do that than have not done it. I basically would call that erring on the side of caution. I know some people are like dead set against them. I know it's all being debated to death. I kind of wish people didn't debate it and just everyone got it. That's what I wish, okay? I get to wish. We all have opinions. I wish everyone got it and we kind of just, I don't know, force field bubble this thing away from us to where the United States can actually prove through numbers that we're just doing better. And because, like I said, I don't follow the news. The news is very stressful, very depressing. It can really upset you. And with I'm hearing little tidbits that I'm not even looking into about other countries and how bad it is. I'm like, oh, it's still going on. Even without looking, I'm hearing whispers, And if I were to actually turn on the TV, I'd probably think, oh my goodness, So it's not just a U.S. problem. And I know a lot of you guys are international viewers anyway, so I'm talking to you in your countries. And everyone around the globe is hoping to survive this thing, And I know the risk is lower than some other things, but it's still not good, and people have died of it, and I just don't want to be one of them. Rob says, you can come fix up my stuff. I've got all kinds of new toys. You can log into my Apex and fix all my errors. Yeah, that might be a good one to do. I'll keep you in mind. Seriously. Actually, I had someone local say, I said, how's your tank doing? And he, in the background, because we were on FaceTime, you just saw a blue glow and you couldn't see anything. And he says, I haven't cleaned the glass in weeks. I said, I clean my glass every single day. And he just said, yeah, I don't do that. Yeah. And I was like, all right, well, you should. And you should test your water. I told him that too. And so I think it was like a day or two later, he cleaned the glass and he sent me a picture and goes, this is why I don't clean my glass. And it's ugly inside. It's just not doing well because he's so frustrated. He's just basically, he's making sure there's flow and light and water, but he's not doing anything with it. He's just frustrated with some of the gear. He's frustrated with how it acted. He's frustrated with the algae problems. And so he said, why don't you come here and fix my tank and just come once a month, and I'll even pay you. I said, you can't fix that tank with once a month visits unless you want this to take 18 months to fix it. I mean, this is going to have to be almost like a weekly thing to get it back into shape. And he was like, that's fine too. So who knows? Like I said, maybe I can do something with a series. At least he's semi-local enough to where I could run over there and do it. I mean, it's like an hour and a half drive each way. But, you know, it could be an interesting series. Paula, since you brought up TVs, I'll go back to that topic. It's my favorite topic right now. Let me shrink this down just slightly. She had said that, you know, warranties with LG is not great. There's screen burn and, you know, other things. And then there's the QLED from Samsung, which I think QLED was also on the Sony. So anyway, those are, I was trying to understand QLED versus OLED and try and figure out which is what as well. That was another topic that came up. And back to COVID. Cotty's Reef says, restrictions are coming back in the UK due to the new variant. Yes, that was the whispers, that there's a new variant that has come out. Ugh, so frustrating. I remember where a year and a half ago, I put on my mask every time I went out. But I said, and I pretty much said, I'm almost sure I said on this live stream, I hate that I have to wear the mask. And I hate that we're doing that here. I remember watching people do that 5 years ago. And specifically, it always seemed to be people that I'd encounter in the airport that were traveling, and I'm not being racist. I'm just saying they looked Chinese and they had a mask. And I don't recognize, the different Asian races at all. I'm bad at it. And I usually have to say, where are you from, to kind of understand, because I'd love to know the difference between Korean, Chinese, all the other ones. So, but anyway, they would wear these masks. And of course, no one in the airport wore masks, just these few travelers, And I just thought, man, do you really feel that unsafe? Do you really feel like it's that risky? And like I said, this was a long time ago. This was 6, 7, 8 years ago when I was seeing that. And now everywhere you look, people wearing masks. And I remember saying, I hate that has come to America. I hate that we have to do this. And yet it's come to all the countries, But at the same time, I'm putting it on every single time. And I have to remind myself from time to time to wash it because, you wear it all day and then it doesn't smell so good. But I'd rather wear it. And you know what? I haven't had like flus or colds or anything like that. So I've been pretty fortunate. And that could be possibly because I had the mask on when I'm around other people. Elliot says, a copperband and a clam was a no-go for me. Thank you, Elliot, for telling me that. And then the Herm says, I have copperbands in my tanks. My office tank and my bedroom tank have clams, and they both have not picked at them either, or ever. I've had them for over a year, and the copperbands are no issues with clams. It could be, like, if I go back to Elliot, maybe Elliot will chime back in again. It could be, I'm thinking in my head, Elliot had a clam, and he bought a copperband, and the copperband's like, ooh, clam meat, chomp. But the Herm had clams, had the copperband already, decided to add some clams, and the copperband's used to fish food already, so it wasn't a factor. And so the clam never even got on the menu, and not even as a choice, because it's like, oh, that just looks pretty. That just belongs here. Maybe that's it. I mean, that's what I'm wondering. I'm kind of hoping, because I feed that copperband every single day, and it's a mixture of frozen foods, and she goes after all of it. Obviously she's picky of what she wants in the collection, but she is getting plenty of food, so she doesn't have a need to go attack something else to find sustenance. But yeah, I'm still a little nervous. I'd hate to lose it. And I'd hate for the clam to break its rostrum, the beak. So we have a 50-50 so far in the election of can you do it or not. Nick says I should buy a used TV so I have money for the clam. Good point. It's a very good point. Cotty says, what about putting a blood red shrimp in a 100-gallon tank with a flame hawk? The flame hawk should not eat shrimp. The Arceye hawk definitely will. A long-nosed hawkfish should not. I've had those types of fish with peppermint shrimp, cleaner shrimp, blood shrimp, and never had any kind of issue. I don't think you're going to run into a problem. You could maybe just double check in Google, but last I recall, the ornamental shrimp are safe with the flame hawk. Flame hawks are usually considered reef safe. Oh, thank you, Brad, for bringing this up. So I have a little bit of a rant. I always try to save rants for the show, right? Let's see if I can get this thing to focus a little bit. Is it going to focus on me? No? Yes? No? Maybe? Maybe. Maybe it's going to focus on the tank behind me. I probably have to stand wherever the square is on the screen. Whatever. Now you can look at the reef instead of me. This week, I saw someone post something in a Facebook group about lighting. And he asked the question, and he says, how do I change my Radeon XR15 blue to have more white? And one of the immediate answers he got was blue is for your reef and white is, and he said, and I didn't look up information to verify it, but he said, BRS said white is just for your own personal preferences, just for pretty looks. And my brain exploded. I was just like, you have got to be kidding me. And I wasn't like, let me go on the warpath and go attack BRS for this. But the information he stated was incorrect. And of course, I held my tongue because, number one, I didn't want to get in a fight. And number two, I wanted to talk with someone else that deals with lighting way more than I do. I mean, I understand lighting, but there are experts out there like Tulio from Reef Bright, who has given presentations, just like Sanjay has done presentations. But Tulio has been studying light for 20 years. Dana Riddle's another one that's studied light. He's even studied LED technology in the oceans, doing tests. So these are the kind of people I like to talk with. And I called him up. I was like, okay, this is what I saw. Oh my God, I'm so annoyed. And he said, all I want you to do is go Google this. And I wrote it down. Let me go get it, because I didn't memorize it. I almost have it memorized, but not quite. All right, I'm coming. Oh, let me grab one more thing while I'm doing it. Wanted to grab my watch so I can see what time it is. Try not to knock over the Hollywood lights. All right. So he said, just Google light absorption in seawater. Just go into Google and Google that. And learn the depths of light penetration into the ocean and see where the blue really is. And you'll realize where it is. It's so deep, that's not where our corals are coming from. And I was like, exactly. And people will say, oh, well, you get these SPS corals and they're coming from water that's blue. I'm like, no, it's not. The blue is a reflection from the sky, first of all. And there are certain spectrums that come down. Anyway, I will be Googling this. I will probably write a blog about it because this one has irritated me enough to where I want to write something about it. But light absorption in seawater is what I'm going to start with. And then I'm going to start figuring out where things are. And when we're talking about true blue is at 100 meters, you're not getting SPS corals from 100 meters typically. We're normally getting things that's 15 meters, 15 feet, which is 3 meters. Our corals tend to come from much shallower waters. And if you were there and you were looking, you would see these corals and you would see the water around you is not blue and doesn't even have the appearance of blue. As you look off into the distance, you might get the blue because of the way diffusion works and distance and all that kind of stuff. But if you were to scoop some water into the ocean, it's not blue water. And it literally is a thing where, okay, let me just stop there and switch gears for a second, because back in the early 2000s, there were people out there that were growing SPS corals under 6,500 Kelvin bulbs, 6500. And it was yellow and it was hideous and the corals grew huge. and they grew fast. And you'd add alkalinity, and you dosed kalkwasser, and you threw these hideous bulbs of these corals to grow them. And they would do it. And then after a while, they would take these bigger corals and they put them under some blue light to give them more color, to make them prettier so they could sell them. And then I would say the mid-2000s, there were a few coral vendors online you could buy things from. And people would say, I just bought this coral and here's a picture on their website. And then they would get it and it's not the same. And almost invariably, they would always say, well, you don't have the same lights that we do. And of course, then there was all these debates on like the forums saying how it's a scam and they're using Photoshop and they're cheating and they're making everything different and it's completely invalid and you can't believe anything you're seeing. And I kept thinking, why don't these coral vendors just take a picture with white light and then take a picture with blue light and show us the coral under both, so when we're shopping, we can say, okay, it's going to be somewhere in that range. And no one that I can think of off the top of my head did that. And then we had a fish store here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that opened up, or had been open for years. And when I would go into his store, all the tanks in the store, because he had freshwater and... No, he just had saltwater. But he had all these aquariums full of fish. And then he had the coral tanks. And the coral tanks were under pure blue light. And it was like the first time I'd ever seen that. And I was like looking at these tanks and it was just looking through Papa Smurf pee. You couldn't see anything. And I'm just like, okay. And, I would take my Fuji camera out and I would take a picture adjusting the white balance and I'd say, oh, so that's what the coral looks like. And I'd decide, do I want to buy it? And I did that all the time. And then over time, more and more stores started selling corals under blue light. And more hobbyists started using blue light. And they're like, oh, everything looks so much prettier. And we knew things looked better under blue. I mean, that wasn't some secret. There was people buying 20,000 Kelvin metal halide bulbs and glowing their tanks that way. But their growth was super slow because it was blue light, where white light excites the growth far better. And so one of the things that I was talking about with Tulio on the phone was the actual making, I don't know, he said something that I didn't memorize. But let me just spit out words like you hear on Jurassic Park. The genome and the DNA sequence and blah, blah, blah. So you get where I'm going. He was talking about how there's certain things or enzymes or amino acids or something in there that it's designed to accept light, like the coral out of the box, like in the ocean, is designed to accept light a certain way. And when we provide different light than what they actually get in the ocean, the coral has to adjust and use other parts of itself and adapt to find a way to make that light work so that the coral can grow, which is probably part of the reason why there's a slower growth with a very blue tank versus a tank that has white light. It's like right now, my tank is looking, on camera, that looks like a 10K reef. In person, that looks more like a 7K reef. But the camera kind of adds a little bit of blue. So, it's pretty. It actually, like I said, on camera, that when I'm looking at this, I feel like I'm looking at this from sunlight into the ocean, and it makes me happy. But later on in the evening, my tank is much more blue because I like to see all the colors just really be ridiculous and pop. And I enjoy it, but I don't do that all day long. And this spectrum, I'm talking about this 8K, that's not my daily schedule either. That is my streaming schedule. I do it for you guys each Saturday for a couple of hours so you can actually see the corals, and it's not just blue blobs. Or it's not just a green screen to where you have nice video, but you can't actually see the tank under normal conditions. So instead, I try to show you something that seems semi-realistic and where we can actually move things around. You can kind of see I'm doing things. And let's see if we can put it. Look, there's a pretty acro. So white grows corals. Blue shows more color. That's the difference. And if you have a light, an LED fixture, that you can schedule it, I always recommend throw white light at your tank during the daytime while you're at work, and then switch to the blue for the evening for your personal enjoyment. So you get the enjoyment, but you're giving the corals what they need to grow. And I don't know what BRS said or didn't say. And I also know that sometimes somebody might say something and it's interpreted differently than what they said. But white is not for your personal enjoyment. White is actually very important. And if you are not providing the type of light that these corals naturally get. And that's where the debate comes in. And like I said, people debate this stuff. And I'm just not into the fight. I'd much rather just kind of get my information together, write a blog, stick it on my website, and then you can read it and decide for yourself if you believe it or not, because that's how we do with anything you read online. Do you believe it or not? But yes, as you go deeper, certain spectrums do drop off, but it takes a while to drop off the white light. It's not like it stops at 10 feet and everything under it's just blue, and that's why you should have blue corals. That's wrong. That shouldn't be stated. So I very much doubt the person that typed that is hearing my show right now, and that's okay. Because eventually I'll have a blog, and if I come across that topic again, I will drop in a link, and that'll be the end of that. So anyway, that whole thing, that tirade of mine, that rant, was because of Brad Hobby's nice post where he said, I just want to thank you for setting me straight on my lighting spectrum. Since then, I've been able to watch my corals grow. It seems almost daily. It's been very gratifying. Thank you. You're absolutely welcome, and I'm happy for you. Now, let's see if I can get myself back into focus. Ah, better. All right. Reefing Medics says, I want to make my skimmer a recirculating CO2 scrubber, but the space above it is limited. Can I still make it work, or is a lot of extra space required? I don't think you need a lot of space. If you've watched Reef Dudes, he created a thing that fit on the lid of his skimmer with the CO2 absorbing media that's in basically a dome that looks like one of those Ziploc containers, where he basically, I think he glued it on with a hot glue gun. And then I guess eventually has to peel it apart and then re-glue it down for the next time. And that way he could constantly remove CO2 from the air that's coming out of the protein skimmer, and which would help drive up his pH. By the way, one person mentioned, hey, while you're out of town, you should check your graphs in Apex and see if your pH went up, because it probably did. And so I went ahead and looked, because I thought, oh, that's a good thing I hadn't even considered. And so I looked, and normally my tank runs 8.0 to 8.2 every day. And yesterday, the tank reached 8.3, as did part of Thursday. So it was interesting that it did go up 0.1 higher because I wasn't around breathing. So it was true. Rob says, what's a VCR? A video cassette recorder. Now, don't ask me what a CNC is, because I never know what that stands for. Michael says, how much more forgiving do you find the easier SPS corals to be, like bird's nest, stylophora, pacillipora, versus keeping acropora? Yes, the ones you listed are considered to be much easier. You can just put them in the tank, and they tend to do very well, and specifically bird's nest grows really fast. I always hear pacillipora will push out or throw babies into the water column, and you'll have them everywhere in your tank, and that's never happened with me. I actually planted a little piece right there, and it's still right there. And then I planted a little bit larger one behind that frog spawn right there, and it's just down there doing its thing. And I've only had it a couple of months, but for it to appear somewhere else would be surprising, because I've never seen that happen in my tanks. But if it did, I wouldn't be offended. I might be happy to see it scatter away through the reef. And of course, you can always just pluck it off of wherever it is, and because it's not like bolted down, and you could remove it and give it to someone else and let them have some to grow. But those are easier. Acropora is a little bit harder. The water has to be a little bit more precise, a little bit more pristine. The lighting has to be a little bit better intensity. It's more, the other one, like for example, let me give you this as an example. My first aquarium that I had, that I set up in 1997, was a 29-gallon aquarium, and it used power compact light bulbs. So a power compact light bulb is skinnier than a it's same size diameter as a T5 bulb, but the ones I used were U-shaped, and they had this weird socket on the end, and the socket either had 4 pins in a row or had 4 pins in a square. And you always had to know, is it square pin or straight pin? Because you never wanted to buy the wrong ones and come home and you couldn't plug them in. And with power compacts, I was able to keep pacillipora alive as well as bird's nest. They both were growing very well. And then it was at my first MACNA in 2002, I stood in, trying to remember the name of her company, but I can't. I stood in Joy's booth, and I was very interested in trying out something more than a colt coral, something more than zinnia, something more than mushrooms. And I'm looking at all these acros, and I'm looking at clams and all this stuff, and I was like, what can I get? And she said, what kind of lighting do you have? I said, power compacts. And I said, but it's a 29-gallon, so it's a small tank. It's not crazy tall. So my lighting is actually pretty well contained. And I said, I really want some kind of an SPS coral. And so she sold me a hot pink Pasillipora from Hawaii. And I brought that home, and it was great. But then one thing wasn't enough. I said, I want one other thing. And I said, what about these clams? And she's like, oh, you absolutely cannot keep a clam in your tank. And I was like, oh. And I just kept looking at those clams, and I was like, are you sure? And she said, people have metal halides for clams. And I just thought, I want to try it. And so I got the beautiful aqua blue or peacock blue Maxima clam, and I put it in my tank, and she probably rolled her eyes, behind my back, and thought I was insane. And it was about 3 inches when I brought it home. And I kept that Maxima clam in there for several years. It grew to be at 5.5 inches. I fed a lot of phytoplankton to that tank, and it was a beautiful clam. And people kept saying, how is Mark growing a Maxima under Power Compacts? So the whole point of what I'm saying here is the easier, now I guess I did go off track a little bit, but the Power Compacts were not as good a light as like a metal halide were, and yet Pasillipora and Bird's Nest were totally fine. In the case of me doing a Maxima, again, my light wasn't fantastic, but my bulbs were never old. I always replaced them in a timely fashion, probably every 6 months, maybe every 9. And my water column was about this, sorry, I have to back up, you can see my hands. It was about this tall, the 29 gallon, because there was some crushed coral on the bottom. There's the plastic trim, the water's down here, the light was right here. And I did it, I grew it. And I don't know, maybe I was, back then, my nickname probably should have been Inappropriate Reefer, like Inappropriate Reefer is over on Instagram, because he would do things you're not able to do normally. And I just would choose to do some things. And I wasn't like I was trying to be super stubborn. I was a little bit, I was very young in the hobby and didn't have enough experience or enough knowledge. And so I was just throwing things together I hoped would work. And for the most part, everything worked out really, really, really well. So if you're thinking, I want an Acropora, and you want to try it, you could actually try an Acropora, not an Acropora. An Acropora is a different type of coral that also is easier compared to Acropora. It's not as light demanding. They grow relatively quickly, and they're very pretty. But if you did want to try an Acropora species of some kind, I would stick to something very simple, something inexpensive. Maybe you can get a frag from a friend, or you could get something brown that costs nothing at the fish store, and then see what it does in your tank. And you're going to have to place it about midway up in the tank. I wouldn't put it down low. I mean, you can start it down low. I always tell people to do that. When you get it, dip it, put it down on the sand bed, and leave it alone for a week to just recover and deal with your water, your light, your flow, and then move it up to a midpoint in the tank where it's getting some decent light, and decent flow. And if you do that and it does well, then you might be able to go into other acros as well. But I would not do anything crazy like get a Walt Disney, get a Home Wrecker, get a Pink Panther, get all these name brands that cost a fortune. You're just literally, you might as well just burn the cash now and not even go through the trouble. It's just much better to try something very simple, something inexpensive, and see how it does. And if it does well, try and find 1 or 2 others that are also nice, but reasonable in price, and just work your way up. This year, my reef lost a whole bunch of corals because of the potassium disaster, the lack of potassium in my salt mix. And I was given a lot of corals as gifts, and they gave me nice ones, nicer than what I had. And I'm just like drooling over my tank each day because they're so pretty. These are corals I would never buy in real life because they're just, the price tag's so high, it's like it just makes me upset. So, but I mean, it doesn't mean I've never bought an expensive coral before. I've spent, I think the most I ever spent on a coral was $350. And I was just like, I don't care what this costs, put it in a bag. And then he told me the price. I was like, maybe I do care a little bit. But I don't normally go out hunting down the most expensive stuff. A lot of corals I would get would be $20, $30, $40, $60, $90. But I'm not looking for things that cost $1,000 because invariably the ones that cost a lot of money are usually the first ones to die in your tank. So you don't want that to happen. Hey, Casual Reef Keeping, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And it says you've been a member of this channel for 5 months. Thank you for that as well. If you don't know about the membership system, on YouTube, when you're on someone's channel, you can hit the join button, and that will allow you to be a contributor of the channel, and you get little perks that what that channel offers. And there are different like tiers, and I think mine is like $5 a month or $10 a month or $100 a month. I mean, there's some choices, but just so you know, the $100 a month one gets you a one-on-one phone call for an hour each month, and so some people like that. But the system was set up so that you could do this, and when I set it up, I had to make a video explaining the membership thing, the join button. And I went through the whole process, and I upload my video just like YouTube tells you to do. And then I look on my screen, and there's no join button for me to show you. And I'm like, well, that's so weird. Turns out, if you're on an Apple device, the join button doesn't exist. You have to be in a browser, and on the PC, you'll see it. On an Android phone, you'll see it. But apparently, the join button, I think, if I read correctly, the join button made Apple say, if you're going to have this thing that takes money, then we get a cut. And YouTube says, no, we're not giving you a cut. So they just removed the join button from the iOS app for the phone or the iPad. But I can go into Safari, and I can type in youtube.com/MilosReef/join, and I can actually see the join button, or I can somehow join that way. So if you're looking to join the channel, you are welcome to do so, and I appreciate the support. And thank you very much for the compliment, Casual Reef Keeping. Gulf Coast Reefer says, can dust give you silicates? I don't think so. How do you clean the fans in your lights without getting that into the tank? I would cover the tank. So you can throw a sheet over the top, or a drop cloth, or thin plastic, or you can set a board across the tank. Whatever you have that's solid. It could be a dinner tray. If it fits on top of the tank and stays put, you can then do what you need to do. Or you can take the light fixture and literally remove it from the hangers and go do it like on your workbench, which might be better anyway. Like when I've taken radions apart, I'm literally like on my workbench, and I'm removing all these screws, and I'm scrubbing the plastic, and I'm trying to really get all the stuff that's built up in there over the last too many years. Because I don't necessarily, well, no, I don't think about cleaning lights. I make sure that the lens is clean, but I don't think about the innards and all that. And so invariably when I open one up and look, I'm always kind of disgusted. I'm thinking, man, I really should have done this sooner. So if you're going to do something over your tank and you're worried, you should cover the tank with something. And that's also good because if you drop a screw or anything, it lands in the cloth or the tray or whatever you had sitting there, and it won't go into your reef to where you have to worry there's some kind of metal in your tank now. But no, I don't think you'll get silicates from that. Let's see. Scuba JT says, when I went to China, I had to wear a mask due to air pollution quality. They had an app that told you when it was okay to go outside and when it was a risk. I remember when I was a kid in California, they would warn us about ozone alert day, or that the pollution was so bad, and the sky was brown. It was really gross. And, even here in Texas, we'll get these alerts saying it's not good to go outside. Do not, we don't recommend you go for a run. We don't recommend you mow your lawn. We don't recommend, you ride a bike. Today's a bad choice. So so I see what you're saying. That could be. So maybe it wasn't always that. Maybe it was just pollution rather than trying to avoid some kind of sickness. Thank you. Oh, and see, Sierra Lucas says something similar. There are a lot of Chinese people coming to my hometown during the summer, and they wear masks because in their cities are very polluted, and they think our cities are too. Oh, okay. Reef with Me says, what are your thoughts on people at the gas station or pharmacy or wherever that aren't wearing their masks? I think about that a lot. And what I do is I think I'm wearing my mask, and I also think they probably think I'm weird because I'm wearing one and they're not. But I'm at the point where I just don't care what they think. And I'd rather just wear mine and hopefully not catch COVID. My friend Dwayne wears a mask to work all the time, got both shots earlier this year, and ended up getting COVID anyway from someone at work. So it's not guaranteed, but he said the shot helped me because I did not end up in a hospital. And I was like, well, I can't argue with that. That makes sense. I was actually a little bit concerned hanging out with my grandson because he's all loving on me and hugging on me and wants to kiss me and all this stuff. And he is going to preschool. He's in with other children from other families, and who knows how any of them live their lives. And we know most of those very young children are not being vaccinated at all. And I was kind of thinking, could he possibly be carrying something that's going to make me sick? Because I'm in I hate to admit it, but I'm in the age range where it is more dangerous for me. So I would prefer not to catch it, but that doesn't mean I held him back. I didn't do this, like, stay back. You know, I didn't do that. I, of course, hugged my kid, my grandson, because he's adorable. You know, G-Bear just said New York's governor just stopped elective surgeries. And that actually was something else. Someone was talking to me recently, like in the last few days, and they said they had to do some kind of surgery, and they wanted to hurry up and do it now before the elective surgeries were turned off again because the hospitals are overtaxed. And I didn't even know. Yeah, so this stuff's happening, man. It's not just one or two people. I mean, this stuff's happening everywhere, and everyone's got a story. Brymax says I should have Tulio on the stream sometime. I would love to do that, and I probably will at some point. He may not talk about that topic because he, like me, doesn't want to get in a fight with people and debate all this stuff. He wants to look at the science. And he'll explain it. And you know what he's saying makes sense. And even then, you know, even if I don't understand everything he's saying, I'll usually use an analogy saying, so you're saying it means like this, this, this? And he's like, exactly. I'm like, okay, good. I'm on the right page. And sometimes he'll say things that basically reaffirms what I already believed anyway with what he's explained. I'm like, see, that's what I thought. And so I feel a little bit more, I don't know, relieved, vindicated, whatever you want to call it. Just, there are certain things that work really, really well, and there are certain things that don't. And one of the hashtags for my social media is answers that work. And I really do believe the things I teach you guys, the things I discuss, because I've been doing them myself. If I had just grown a tank with pure blue light and everything, I mean, if I literally lived it, I can then tell you what happens. And if I did some testing, I can explain what happened. And I realized I have never actually run a reef tank, you know, filled with SPS corals with only blue light. I refuse to even buy that kind of lighting. When I got my Radions, the new ones, for the frag system, and some people have been saying you should get rid of the frag system. I don't completely disagree with you. But when I bought those, I wanted the XR15 Pro, not the XR15 Blues. The difference between the Pro and the Blue is more white LEDs. So the Blue has some LEDs, but less. So you don't have as much of the white to play with. So what you would have to do to get more white light out of that light would be literally turn down the Blues a lot and hope you have enough white left over to kind of blend in and get you closer to a 10 or 12K spectrum, 12,000 Kelvin spectrum. But yes, that's exactly it. White is for growth and blue is for show. Now, photosynthesis is really important. And when you think about these growers, including like the places where they're growing lots of marijuana or pot, like the kids say, they're using like pink light and red light. And I'm just like, oh, because when I go outside and I look at the sun, the sky is not pink or red. And so I keep thinking it's dumb, but apparently they grow their plants a lot faster under that spectrum. And so you've seen the refugiums are more and more pink and purple and red these days. And I just, you know, I actually called Tulio and said, I want a light for my refugium, make me an XHO, and I want plant growth. And he gave me a combination, I believe, of 5,500 Kelvin and 6,500 Kelvin, or 5,100 Kelvin and 65. And if you look at the reflection in the water, that's the best way to look at LEDs, by the way, if you didn't know that. If you got the light hanging over the water and you look at the reflection, you can see the diodes of the LEDs and you can see what color they are because you're not being blinded. And I can look down there and I will see every other one is the other color. So it's sort of like a zipper all the way across. And I grow Caulerpa like crazy. You guys never see me without Caulerpa. And even when I take a bunch out, within a matter of weeks, it's all filled in again. And I'm using white light. I'm not using pink. I'm not using red. I'm using what I consider natural light. And I know I might be a little old school in that regard, but it works. There you go. Josh the Box says I use 6,500 Kelvin bulbs in my bulb combination. And Reefing with O says, well, the explanation of lighting is too simplistic. We need to talk about spectrum more than colors. And that's true. And so, you know, if we keep talking about that, then we're going to be talking about nanometers. And should you be, you know, 440, 420, 470, 590? You know, that all comes into play too. But in the end, we really just need to know what works and works well so we can share it with each other so they can do it too. And a long time ago, I even suggested this in one of my Macna talks, and a lot of people said, oh, I love that idea, but no one ever did it. I always thought it'd be great if people could measure their tank with a par meter and measure the light and tell us what they're using. So there's a lot of spinning plates here, but tell us what they're using, how long they're using it, what distance the coral is from that light, all that kind of stuff. And then give us what the species is. And it doesn't have to be like a red planet acropora. It could just be acropora as far as I'm concerned. The things we like Disney, that's a tenuous, an acropora tenuous. And if we knew acropora tenuous was being entered by thousands of people into this database, and the measurements of par are all ranging in a certain area because everyone's submitting their numbers, we could get some great numbers and say, oh, if I really want to have an acropora tenuous in my tank, I need to have a spot in my tank that has between 360 and 420. That seems to be the sweet spot out of all the information we've gathered. And I always thought it'd be really cool to build this database of par numbers from all the hobbyists, because we all are obsessed with our tanks. We love to buy the electronic toys, and I know par meters are expensive, but if you're in a club, you can borrow the meter. I found out you can rent one from BRS and just return it. So, I mean, there's other choices besides spending the money to buy your own meter. There is the PMK, which is a kit that has a par meter built in that ties into the Apex system to measure par that way. So you could literally actually gather information, submit it to some collective entity, and then we would have this database so you could pull it up and you would find out, yeah, green star polyps doesn't need anything over 50. It needs nothing. It's almost nothing at all. And then you've got other corals that, for example, I got this one down here, and it's doing really poorly. And I really think it got too much light, even being way down there. I don't think putting it up high was something going to make it do better. And I might have been wrong on that one. But every other coral in my tank is doing great. So I'm just thinking, I'm chalking that up to, I just had a bad experience with that one frag that I got at Aquashella. And I don't know what happened. But since 99% of my reef is doing great, I'm happy with it. And I'm not going to sweat the loss of that one that I tried to add recently. But if you know there's a coral, like for example, I believe it's Red Planet. People say that one has to be up high to get the red and greens. And if it's down low, it'll just be completely green. And so basically it'd be much nicer if we knew instead of up high and down low, if we said it has to be 400 par to be red and green. But if you're down at 200 or if you're less than 350 or something like that, it's going to be a green coral. Then you just know you either have enough light or you don't to even buy that coral. So I think that'd be a useful, practical thing we could use. But we would need to know also, like Reefing with O said, we need to know the spectrum. We need to know what lighting it was under for those results. It's not just the intensity, but also the color mix that coral got, and so why it did the way it did. And then also, you don't know, but what if these sellers, the ones that have these corals, are growing them in higher pH, higher potassium, and they're getting these ultra vivid coral colors, and then you put it in your tank and you don't have very high pH. You have normal pH, or you don't even think about potassium. You've never measured in your life, like that was me. And so you don't have the same vivid corals, and you're thinking, why am I not getting? I mean, I bought it. It was really expensive. It was really pretty. And in my tank, it looks kind of meh. And that's because this sounds a little bit like a conspiracy theory, but maybe that coral was cooked a little bit to look so fantastic so it would be sold versus what it would be in normal tank water with a normal hobbyist. It's kind of a theory I have. I just have a feeling there's a few sellers out there that really know chemistry and have figured out how to juice their corals to look so good, because you're just looking in their tank and like everything's fantastic. Like, yeah, I want that and that and that and that and that. And then you come home, you put them in your tank, and within a matter of weeks or a month or two, they just don't look as fantastic as that did when you saw it. I don't know. I don't know why it's like that. I haven't figured that one out. There's a lot of conversation. I'm trying to find the next question. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving as well. Did any of you guys gain any weight? I'm very curious. Did any of you dare get on a scale after Thanksgiving to see where you're at today? Oh, here's something interesting. I was reading this comment from Reefing with O. Some people light their tanks whiter or bluer. It's a personal preference. We all perceive this differently. I like my tank in the middle. Some people might say it's white, or others would say it's blue. That's interesting. And think about this. The corals are absorbing certain lights, certain spectrums, certain percentages of everything. And I think it's why the metal halides were such a good, reliable light for so long. And it's not to say you can't grow corals under LEDs. I mean, I've been doing it. I'm doing it now. But it was always considered that the metal halide bulb was more of a full spectrum of everything. It wasn't just one thing. Where with your LEDs, number one, you have pinpoint lighting, and each one is a certain spectrum. So you have a situation where you may be providing the right spectrum, even for that coral, but because that LED is here and that coral is over here, and it's a pinpoint light, it doesn't do this. It's doing this. That one, like let's just say it's a UV LED, never hits this coral, so it doesn't get that piece of the UV. It's in the light fixture, it's in the puck, but it's not over the right spot of the coral, and so it's not getting that. And so while this coral is doing fantastic, this one doesn't do as well. Maybe it's not getting the beam it needs from the certain LED of the right wavelength or spectrum that it should get. I mean, there's a lot to consider when you really think. I mean, you can actually make this super complicated if you want to. Winderwater says, your streams are so addictive. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Winder says, can you put a link to your approach regarding cyanobacteria, please? I heard you say it's on your website, and it's on your stream, so I can't find it. I can tell you, I mean, Andrea probably, yeah, she already put the link there. I was going to say, there's not only an article on there, but also if you look up Red Cyano RX, which is the product I sell, and you look under the description, it says Mila's recommendation. I explain it right there as well. So it's two places on my website. The search engine on my website actually is really good. And if you type something in the one search, which is the one at the top in the navigation bar, that one will search articles and blogs and stuff, and you can just type in cyanobacteria and you'll get what you get, and you'll find the right one. If you type in the larger search box in the middle of the screen, that one is to search the shop, and you can just type in a few letters, and it'll show you a bunch of choices of things that are possibly in the area of what you're looking for. And then if you really can't find something, of course you can ask me, but there's also a thing that I had them add to my website this time that I adore. It's called Shop by Brand. And so you can say, I know this thing comes from Blue Life, and you can click Blue Life USA, and then it'll show everything from Blue Life that's on my website that I sell. And you can find the one thing you're looking for. Or anything from Prodibio, or anything from VCA, or anything from, you know, if I have that item, it's going to be there. Except, caveat, the things that are not on my website right now, because I haven't put them on there yet, even though they're in my inventory, I just haven't had a chance to get them on the website. And there's probably 15, 20, 30 things that are in my inventory that I'm not making any money on because I never told you I have them. So these will be things to do for my New Year's resolution for 2022. I'm hoping that I will be in the new building by the end of the year. And as soon as I'm in the new building and that's set up, the house will have been cleared out of all the business stuff. And obviously the tank will still be here. But all the business stuff will be out there, and I will probably tackle the website at the same time now that it's out there because I've seen it all and it's in front of me. I'm like, okay, I've got to get this on the website. I almost want to just put placeholders that say, you don't get a picture. And underneath, it'll say, you don't get a description, but this is the thing you're looking for. Because that's like the easiest, just to do some kind of quick placeholder. But I know people want to see a product. I mean, I do it too. I go to Amazon and I want to buy something. And I look at all the details. I look at every image. I read the manufacturer's description. I read the reviews. I'm reading all this stuff. And so I know I need to have all that stuff on my website too. And it just takes time. And, you know, if I would just force myself to add one thing a day in 30 days, I'd have it done. But at the same time, I have other things. I have other spinning plates I have to take care of. Back to Black Friday, my question. I do want to tell you a quick little thing that happened. So I was talking to my best friend, who I'm going to go see next week. And I said to her how I got the Furbo hooked up to where I can check on Jack now when I'm not home. And we had it. Caitlin and I had it, but it was in her name, and it was her iCloud account, and I don't have access to that. And so it was kind of just dormant and unplugged. And I went ahead and I reset it back to factory specs so I could create a new account and use it. And so then I asked Jessie, I said, do you have a Furbo too? Because she has a couple of dogs. And she says, no, I don't. And I thought, you know what? And I told her, I said, you know what? I don't know what we were just talking about. Forget it, this whole conversation. And I went to Amazon and I bought her one on the spot. So that way she'll get one as a Christmas present. And I bought it on Thursday, on Thanksgiving. So, I mean, typically, if you buy things on Thursday, that's under the Black Friday umbrella. I mean, just last week I mentioned how Black Friday is like the entire month of November for some reason. And I couldn't understand why. And so I saw the price. I'm like, it seems to be on sale. I'll go ahead and get it. So I bought it, and it's supposed to arrive today. And then yesterday, Jessie sends me a text because she knew I was going to buy it for her. And she said, hey, did you see on Black Friday, they lowered the price $50 off? And I'm like, what? Because I just bought it the day before. And so I called Amazon last night, which, by the way, finding that phone number is not easy. They have literally made a good job of hiding it from Google. But if you have the Amazon app, you can navigate your way all the way into a phone number. And then you don't get the number. You tell them your number and they'll call you back. And they call back instantaneously. I mean, I literally hit submit and the phone rang. I was like, wow. And then it connected me to someone. I said, hey, I just bought this yesterday. It arrives tomorrow. Could you please apply the Black Friday price to this item because it was, it wasn't that price on Thursday. And they said, no, but what we can do is we can cancel the order and tell them not to deliver it, and you can buy it again. I was like, all right. And so I'm looking because I'm on the phone and I'm in Amazon on my computer, and it said if you buy it, right now, yesterday, it'll be here on Sunday. And I was like, well, that works. I don't care if it arrives Saturday or Sunday. So I actually got it for the better price, so it didn't cost me as much. And I'll be giving that to her as a Christmas present that I'm going to hand deliver to her next week when I go see her in Maui. So I'm very excited to spend 7 days there. I am going to be diving, and I'm going to be getting all my gear updated to make sure all the O-rings and all the gaskets and everything are in good shape. Anything that needs to be repaired or replaced will be taken care of because I have a dive trip planned for April of next year that I've been paying for the last year and a half. It's a very expensive trip. And I originally told her I'm not doing it. It's way too much money. But then when they ended up having one bed left, one single, I was like, well, dang it, I'm going to have to do it now. And so I did. And I committed to it. And unless Indonesia's closed, I mean, it's closed right now, but if they're closed next April, the dive trip won't happen. But it would be smart to get in the water because I haven't been diving in 2.5 years and make sure all my gear is good. So that way next April when I go, if everything goes well, I will be on this liveaboard. And a liveaboard is when you actually get on a ship and you go out into the ocean and you live on that boat the whole time and you keep diving off the boat like 5 times a day. And if you want, you can dive that night. And you come back on board and you have dinner and, you get, the royal treatment. And this boat is so fancy. It is so fancy. When Jessie described the ship to me, she said, this thing looks like something that the evil villain has from a James Bond movie. It's beautiful. It's a monster thing. I don't even know what to describe it. It's not a speedboat, but it looks like a speedboat, but like supersized, multiple decks, completely black, like stealth mode. And I get my own butler. I was like, wow, cool. So I am looking very much forward to that dive trip. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. And we are getting closer. And all I can do is hope that COVID doesn't ruin the trip. But in the meantime, I'm going to be there for a week. And so that will affect Reef Diary. You'll have to see what happens. But I'll bring her a present, which I got on Black Friday. So I actually did buy something on Black Friday. I bought something for my son, which wasn't on sale. It was just whatever it cost. And I bought Jessie her present, which saved me a little bit of money. Oh, I remember that. Reef the Sea Forever says, I remember starting a 50-gallon reef tank and I used a Home Depot fluorescent ballast and Coral Care T5 bulbs. Yup. And some people were using bulbs from Home Depot too. And you could buy certain T5s and T12s that were the right spectrum, for half of your bulbs. So like you could buy the 10,000 Kelvin bulb, and then you go buy your super actinic from the LFS. And so you could save money because the one at Home Depot is like $5, where the one you bought at the fish store was probably like $35, $50, depending on the length of the bulb. But I remember we would use ballast from Home Depot back then, and we wouldn't get like ice cap ballast or this or that. And of course, whenever you cobble together something using components you found yourself, you always found yourself having to futz with it and fix it. There was always little tiny things like, oh God, or you'd have to go replace it sooner. It didn't hold up as long as just buying the legit thing. But at the time, there wasn't a lot of choices, and there was not a lot of buying things online. An update on the 60-gallon cube. I did talk with the guys over at Planet Aquariums again, and they are going to be building it after my trip, so that way I can be there to film. So I'll probably be there for 2 days filming what they do there, and my tank being at least partially built through some of the video. And, you know, I said, like, I want to get a video of you guys drilling the holes through the glass and stuff, because they have some fancy machine for that. So that will be coming in the December month. And then once the tank is here, because I'd much rather have it in my possession, then I want to build the stand for it. And then once the stand is built and the tank's been curing for a while and it's ready to go, and I'll make the canopy part that's going to be a 3-sided thing that slides onto the top of the tank to hide the lights, but still slide off to put out of the way to work in the tank. Once I complete that, then I will then take down the 60-gallon cube, transfer the livestock into the new tank, hook up the new plumbing, and have a whole new setup. And that'll be exciting. And that'll be another video. So we have a lot of stuff to look forward to here. Reef the Sea Forever says, Apple always wants a cut, like the mob. Ain't that the truth? It really is true. Let's see. Dan says, how do you feel about Gorgonians? I want one, but I don't know enough about them. The requirements, the growth rates. There are different kinds, so I'm going to kind of tell you to go to Google or go to Live Aquaria and type in Gorgonian, and then look at the different ones they have, and you know, whatever you like the look of, then click it and look at the description, because they have the care, the requirements, and all that listed, and you'll find out which ones are photosynthetic, which means they need light. You'll have some that are non-photosynthetic, which means light has nothing to it, and they rely on food alone to live. And they'll also tell you if it's easy or if it's expert only. So, I mean, it kind of gives you some good clues there. But like this one here in the back corner of my tank, you can't quite see it. Let's see if I can twist this. That one right there is the Tracy Morgan Gorgonian right here. And it came from the 20,000-gallon Reef tank from Long Island. And I've probably had it 6 or 7 years. And I got it, it was actually this tall, and it was 3 little fingers on a plug or whatever. And I put it in my Reef, and it grew really big. And I've cut it down several times. And usually I give some frags to some people. And right now it's all the way up to here. So, I mean, whatever that is, you know, 16 inches tall maybe, 18 inches tall, whatever that is, from the sand to the bottom of the random flow generators, those nozzles. That's the height of it right now. And it was in the middle of my tank, like on the end. And so when you were looking at the Reef, it was like this thing like this, but it was kind of blocking the view. So when I reset the Reef back in June, Dwayne and I talked, and he suggested putting that back corner. I said, yes, that's a great idea. And think about that back corner. It has almost no light there. There's so little light in that corner. And yet that coral has continued to grow and get bigger because it is also feeding off of the food, but it is getting some light. It's not a super high demand coral. I believe it might be in the category of the corky sea finger is the name of a type of Gorgonian. It might be in that family. So you could also look that up. And finding the simple ones, like if you want something bright and colorful, odds are you won't be able to keep it alive. Lots of people used to buy sea fans because they're so pretty and they just watch them die. And actually, I don't know a lot of people to this day that buy sea fans, which is that thing that looks like a giant leaf that's missing all the tissue. It's like all the spider webs, you know, that were the veins of the leaf, but the leaf is gone, if that makes sense to you. Sea fans are these giant living entities, and you put in your tank and the flow is blowing it over, and it's supposed to be capturing food, but it cannot capture nearly enough. But it would do okay, probably, in a non-photosynthetic tank that is being fed food 5-6 times a day. You know, those tanks, lighting doesn't matter. They barely have any light, just enough just to see into the water. And filtration is huge, water changes are huge, and dumping in tons of food in there to keep it alive. And so the water always looks kind of green because they're constantly trying to provide these nutrients. That is not the kind of coral you want to have in your tank. Drug Monkey RX says, dude, I love that name. You have to tell me you work in a pharmacy with that name. That has to be. When I go to the pharmacy to get my prescriptions, and they always say, can I help you? I said, I'm here for the drugs. And in the beginning, they laughed. They've stopped. I guess it's not funny anymore. But I am. I'm literally there for the drugs. But he suggested I pipe the frag system into the tank. The reason I cannot, or the reason I did not, if I wanted to plumb it all together into this system, I'd have to have the pipes going across the floor diagonally through the fish room. I'd have to step over them for the rest of my life, which I really don't want to do because I go in and out of that room 40 times a day. So I don't want to do that because I literally go through to get through that door that gets to the CNC machine where I cut the acrylic, where I have the cardboard. I mean, I have RO system parts and all these things are out there. And that will continue to exist with the new building. The new building is a studio to build things, but that's going to be the workshop where things get cut and edged and prepared and routed and all that kind of stuff. So I still have to go in and out of that room all the time. I don't want to step over the plumbing. And the second reason I made it standalone was because I had people saying, we'd like you to do a product review on this protein skimmer. We want you to do a product review on this light. We want you to do a product review on this additive. And I said, well, I need enough for 450 gallons. I need a huge skimmer if you want me to do a product review. And they say, well, that's really expensive. I'm like, what can I tell you? This is my Reef. I mean, I need something that will work with my Reef. If I put some little tiny dinky skimmer in there, what's my review going to be? I'm going to say it wasn't good. It couldn't keep up. It overflowed all the time. I mean, I don't know what would happen, but I needed something that could work, and so I built a 60-gallon system thinking I can try anything. I can try power head, I can try additives, I can try heater, I can try food, whatever. But the tank has been a nightmare for so long. And I, like I said, I posted some videos in the Reef Diary this last week of me cleaning up some stuff on it. And, a couple people said, just get rid of it. I'm like, yeah, I really should. Or I should turn it into something decent that just lives and quit calling it the frag tank, because it really has no frags at this point. All the frags I had died from the potassium problem. So I don't know. I actually thought about maybe making it smaller. So instead of it being a 4-foot tank, it becomes like a 2-foot tank. And then I have room for a small quarantine tank next to it for new fish arrivals. And the standalone quarantine would just be a cube with no filtration at all, except something I can like hang on it, because quarantine is quarantine for a reason. You don't want any of that stuff to get in to the filtration and get elsewhere. Usually it's just a box of water with a hang-up back filter, a light, and a heater. And it's something you can clean and remove and scrub down. And so I was thinking maybe I could do that instead. So I'm still kind of on the fence what I want to do. But I'm super frustrated that the front panel is not see-through. And that's why I mentioned a while back that I just have to build a new tank anyway to replace it, or I have to completely drain that tank and buff it smooth, which most people that say they work on their tanks to buff them takes them a week of just working on it daily. And I don't really have a week to allocate to it. So it might be easier for me to spend a couple of days and build a new tank than spend a week trying to polish an old one. So it's, anyway, I'm going to do my water test today. I'm going to test the water in that tank and see where things are. There's 3 clownfish in there. There's like 4 or 5 anemones. There is a piece of that Gorgonian in there. And then there's sand and bubble algae. So not a lot of other life in there. But, nothing's dying. It just doesn't look good. And it's just frustrating to me. That's interesting. Brymax says the growers are actually moving away from the blue-purple grow lights and more toward full-spectrum lighting. Interesting. Steve says, hi from Essex, UK, where the weather is freezing. Well, over here, the weather is 57 and it's raining and I hear thunder outside. I kind of like this angle, the way I changed the camera. I should do it like this all the time. Looks pretty good. Let's see. Ryan says it'll be interesting to see what your pH does once your shop is operational. You're not around it as much. Yeah, I agree with you. And then Rogue Gaming says that Dana Riddle states that corals adapt to the spectrum they get, and that's why people have success with different lights. And that's kind of what Tulia and I were talking about, that the coral will have to adapt, literally change its literal makeup of how it's designed to absorb what it needs to grow and synthesize sugar into energy. And when they have a different light, they have to like use different enzymes now and adapt to be able to do that. And I thought it was really interesting. And Reef the Sea Forever says, thanks for the safety stop video. I always refer to it when I add new fish. Yeah, I use that product myself. And fortunately, I don't have to watch the video because I've used it for over a decade. Glenn says, what's your favorite item you made or bought for the aquarium this year? I don't know. I mean, I'd have to really think about it. But one of the things I made that I was really proud of was that little tiny bracket that fit under the MP60s so that they'll never fall off the tank. And I showed that with people, to a lot of people, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, I need 20." They all wanted it, and I haven't made any since. I literally made the prototypes; they came out great. They work exactly as I hoped, and I just need to have the time to lay a sheet out and actually start cutting out pieces, start gluing them together, and make them available from the shop. And I'm really proud of that because I literally came up with it out of my head, and it was just my own thing that I dreamt up. And it was, remember, I had those MP60s brand new in the box for months, waiting for me to make that thing because I said, I'm going to do something different with the MP60s when I install the new pump. And I wanted some kind of method that was better than putting 6 of those sticky tabs up there to hold the cord and support the pump because it just looked kind of ugly and dorky. And so when I came up with that little acrylic thing and it worked out so well, I was really happy about it. Let's see. Winderwater says, should the flow patterns or intensity be different at night? If so, what do you think is best? I don't really mind if the flow is a little bit less at night, but I do want to urge people to be careful not to slow it down too much. You don't want to turn your ocean into a lake at night because you can actually lower the oxygen levels in your aquarium. So like, for example, you may have for the Vectra pump. The Vectra pump allows you to go from 0 to 100%. And you might say, yeah, during the daytime, I want it running like 75, 85%. But then you might say, at night, I'm going to run it at 20%. And you may discover that the water is moving so slowly down the drain and into the sump and back up to the tank that the tank is getting colder all night long. And in the middle of the night or early in the morning, like 5 a.m., 6 a.m., the tank's actually really chilly. And because the heat is down in your sump and the water's coming up so slowly, it's not adding any heat to the tank and the tank's getting cold. But then, by, 9 a.m., you've got your Vectra pushing back at like 60% or 70%, and you're pushing the warm water up. And so you look at the tank and the temperature's right, everything seems right, and you're thinking it's great. And we want to make sure that I like to just keep the same speed all the time. My return pump never varies. I have a Biz pump. It actually has the ability to program all this stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I think it's at 80% all the time. And the Anemone Cube pump is actually a manifold pump, so it's feeding multiple things plus the cube, or including the cube. And that one is whatever I've got it at. Maybe it may be at 80% or 70%. I just need enough oomph to fill up a cube, feed a turf scrubber, feed a carbon reactor, and that's it, actually. Those are the 3 things that are on there right now. But if you have like power heads and you can adjust those schedules, one of the things I did with my Nero 5 pump with that programming is I set it to be, whatever it is, 60, 70% all day long. And then during the typical time I might be feeding the tank, like 10:30 to 11:30 at night, somewhere in that window, I told that 1 hour for the pump to slow way down and slow the flow. So when I put the food in, it just goes through the tank. It doesn't shoot through the tank. And then, and so I don't have to actually hit a feed button. It's slowed down during that period. And when I melt the food and then I come over and I put it in the tank, it's just right. And then, 11:30 or 11:31 or whatever the clock is, then it just bumps back up to its normal speed and it runs at full tilt again for the rest of till the next night. Hey, Glenn, thank you very much for the super chat. He says, thanks for staying strong and helping us all. Levi's Aquatic says, do you do any freshwater? No, I don't. I've never had freshwater tanks in my life. Ah, Reef with me was at the LFS and came home with an A can and some of Brightwell's Restore. So the Restore, as far as I understand, is some kind of a dip to help like medicate a coral if you're trying to heal it, right? Kevin James says he just upgraded from a 60-gallon tank to a 125-gallon tank, and he's getting a little overwhelmed. Just take your time and tackle each section as you are doing the conversion. Like, for example, if you're setting from scratch and you're trying to do it better this time, maybe you just worry about the drain plumbing today. And then tomorrow you do the return plumbing going back up. And then, the third day you do the manifold plumbing if you're going to do that. Or you set up your top-off system. Just kind of take your time until everything's just right, and then you can go ahead and get the livestock and, get it cycled, and then eventually move your livestock over. Sean says, any idea what would cause Facilipora and bird's nest tissue to start to recede? These corals have been bulletproof for years and are now showing stress. All the other corals look healthy. Well, it comes down to water testing and see what your numbers are. See if anything has changed from what it normally is. It could be temperatures are changing in the tank because of the time of year we're in. Like I was at my son's house and I was cold. And I usually don't complain about the cold, but I was freezing. And when I was trying to sleep, I literally pulled the blanket over my head just so I could breathe my own hot breath because it was that cold. And I was like, man, it's so cold in this room. And I really didn't feel like getting up and saying, hey, can you guys make the house warmer? I just thought I'll take care of myself in my own room. But my point is, he told me we haven't turned on the heater yet this year, where mine's been on for the last couple of weeks and I only keep my house at 71, but his house was down in the 60s and it was just cold. And plus I was in a guest room with like huge windows and it was probably the cold coming off the glass. But the point is, your tank may have been a certain way for a long time, everything's doing great, and now that our seasons have changed and it's colder, your tank's not as warm as it was. Maybe that's what's happening with these corals. It could be something from the last batch of salt mix to the new batch is a little different, and so it's not getting the same elements it usually gets, the same trace elements that it would expect to get from your normal water changes. It could be the corals grew bigger, and now they're shading the underside, and that part underneath is getting less light. I mean, I had a couple of birds' nests that were doing just fine, and they both went up in smoke last week, and there's nothing left. I mean, not one polyp survived. But there's other birds' nests in the tank that are totally fine. So I can't even explain why those two decided to go up in smoke. Iron War Pig says, I love your videos. I'm a longtime subscriber. Cheers from Canada. Hello, Canada. I do not know if you can mix Restore with Revive, but you could write Brightwell and ask them. I use Revive as my dip. I think Restore, like I said, I think Restore was designed to heal a coral. That's what I thought. And I did ask MetroCat when I was on the phone with her the other day, and she told me, and I immediately forgot what she told me. Chris says, why do you dump salt water on your driveway rather than the drain? Gravity is a really nice thing, where if I were to try and run the tubing from the tank to a drain, a tub, a toilet, the sink in the kitchen, there's the chance that the tube will flop out and send water all over the floor. But if I just run my tubing, and it's the tubing I have, I think I measured it at like 45 feet long. When I uncoil it, it's like halfway down my driveway, and it's got nowhere to go. When I put a pump in the sump and I'm pushing water out, or I put the pump in the tank and I'm pumping water out, I know it's going out there. I don't have to think about anything on the other end of the tube. Where if I'm inside the house and it's somewhere in my house, there's a chance something will go wrong. And trust me, things have gone wrong in the past, so it's just easier for me to do the driveway. Glenn says that magnifier is really impressive, showing us the coral. Is it a suction cup? No, it's a magnet. There's a huge magnet on it, and it holds it on. And they come in 3 different sizes. This is the biggest one. This is the Deep Sea Magnifier Max, or Deep Sea Max. Then there's the regular one. Then there's the one made for nano tanks. And the magnet sizes shrink down. They're all for the thickness of the tank. Now, my tank is 3/4 inch glass, and the magnet holds well enough. But the backside of this piece was like a felt, like we have on cleaning magnets. And mine would just slide down the glass within seconds. Within a minute, it's down to the bottom of the tank. And so Flipper came out with this rubber pad. So you peel off that felt looking stuff and you put the rubber pad on, and now it actually stays there perfectly. And that's what mine has. Mine has the rubber on the backside and then the magnet inside the tank. And so when I move it around, I just try not to lose the magnet and have it drop. But I can go ahead and put it somewhere else and get a view at something like this Recordia down here. And Sean says, I want a few of those MP60 pump holders. Just let me get them built. Well, as soon as I get them built, then you guys can go crazy and you can say, send me them all. Francisco says, what's your take on Caulerpa, or I'm sorry, macroalgae in the display tank, especially Caulerpa? I actually don't like that species in a display tank because most of the Caulerpas I know of usually put out a root system, and they put their roots all into your rock work. And then if at some point you don't want the macroalgae in your plant, you rip it out, it just keeps coming back out of the rock from those roots. It grows new stems, and it just keeps coming back, and you never get rid of it. And it becomes invasive. And so I don't like it in a display tank. Now, there's a guy on Instagram, I think it's Tiger Boy H2O, and he sets up these macroalgae display tanks, and they're very small. They're all nanos. They're really pretty. They're very pristine. They always look fantastic. And he has all these different kinds of algae, and he decorates them, and he has mangroves come out the top, and then he puts little, like, a pool chair with an umbrella and a little character in there. And so it's kind of like it's got some land going down into the water with his little thing. And he's put in all kinds of filter feeding clams and tunicates and interesting things. And it's really fun. So you can do that if you're trying to do a display refugium. But to put the macroalgae in your display tank, most of us never want any algae in our tank of any kind. And to put one intentionally in there could end up becoming a problem later. So that's why we usually don't recommend it. Oh, I'm back to Kevin's post from before. He had more to say. So Kevin changed from the 60-gallon tank without a sump to a 125-gallon with a sump, and he's overwhelmed with the possibilities of what you can do in the sump. And also, should he be using 2-part dosing or get into using like a calcium reactor? And the reactor seems like overkill. Well, a calcium reactor would work for a 125-gallon tank very nicely, and it would maintain your alkaline and your calcium. It won't take care of magnesium. It won't touch potassium. It won't deal with iron or any of the other stuff. That's trace elements. But having that will add this to your tank all the time. If you prefer to just do 2-part and you're comfortable with it, you can do that with your new bigger tank, and you can have it either trickle into the sump if it's into an area that has a tiny little power head blowing straight up where the water is dripping in. Not the water, the alkalinity and the calcium and the magnesium, the things you're dosing. You want them to dose right over a power head that's pushing water up into it, so the water's not cavitating, but actually making like a little mountain on the surface of the water. So as each drop hits, it just disperses and mixes into the water. Because if you don't have any kind of power head in there, the stuff falls in the water, and it kind of, imagine in your brain, it congeals, and some of it dissipates, and some of it just goes straight to the bottom and becomes like an oil slick of alkalinity, and just sits there on the bottom and did nothing for your tank. So we want it to mix into an area of high flow. If you can't do that, you can have your containers underneath the tank that hold the solution and your dosing pumps, and you can have the dosing pumps go up the back of the tank and into the display, but you want it to trickle in right in front of where the lock line's shooting water out to really chop up the water and mix it up as the alkalinity is hitting the water, as the calcium's hitting the water, as the magnesium's hitting the water, aquapower, any of the things you want to use that are liquids, you want them to disperse rapidly into a lot of water. You don't want to have an oil slick of something that's sinking down to the reef and landing on corals or burning fish or anything along those lines. The reason a calcium reactor is a nicer choice but expensive is because it will take care of the tank long term and last you forever, where the 2-part, you have to keep mixing a solution every single month for the rest of your life. And some people mix up 5 gallons at a time, some people mix up 1 gallon at a time, some people mix less. And you have to always be aware, is there a solution in my container? Is my dosing pump putting out the right amount every single day? They have to calibrate and verify. They have to make sure the tubes aren't clogged up to where no liquid's coming out. I mean, there's a lot of things to keep track of. The calcium reactor, you have to make sure you have CO2, you have to make sure you have media, you have to make sure there's circulation, You have to make sure the effluent, which is the liquid coming out of the reactor, is coming out the same rate, constantly, consistently. So the funny thing is, the amount of money people spend on the dosing container that they want something really pretty, and the dosing head that has 4 or 5 heads in it, and then they buy the powders or the liquids, to mix up their own, and they hook it all up. It's almost as much as the calcium reactor would cost you, where you need a CO2 tank and a regulator and a pH controller and media and some kind of a feed pump. So, and then the reactor itself. But back in the day, we would tell people it costs you about $800 to set up a calcium reactor. And I have run the same calcium reactor since 2004. So I've definitely got my money's worth out of it. I mean, that's 17 years and it's still going. And it's keeping up with my alkalinity perfectly every single day. Whether my reef is packed with corals or shrunk down with these little frags that are growing into pretty corals again, it always has worked out. And this is a 450-gallon system. Intercontinental Cruiser said, how often do you feed Benepets? I seem to be doing it once a week. I'd like to do it more often, but I always forget. And then it's like, oh, it's been a week, and I do it again. Levi says, were you at Aquashella? Yes, I was. I was walking around. I gave a presentation on Sunday. And our club, DFW Mass, had a booth at the far end near the kids' zone where the kids were playing. Kevin wants to know whether he can use a roller mat or a 7-inch sock. Can you convert almost any sump to do that? I was wondering about algae scrubbers or refugium. So when you're deciding what you want to do for a sump, you have to realize how much space you have to work with. And you have to look at the gear and figure out what everything is in size. And the best thing you could do is like open up Photoshop or Paint or whatever it is you use, Affinity, and do the actual box of your tank, your sump, and then find out the size of your skimmer and put the drawing of that somewhere in the sump, and then find out the size of the reactor, put it there, find out the size of the return pump, put it there, measure the length of the heaters, where will that heater fit or will it not fit at all? I need smaller heaters. And you can kind of actually puzzle it all together like a bird's eye view of how it could all go into your sump before you do anything with the tank itself. And that way you can kind of map out, do I have room for a refugium? Can I put an algae turf scrubber? Well, if the scrubber has to be above the sump, how will that limit my ability to get a filter sock out of the back of the sump? Can I put the sock in the front where it's easy to reach? Will the protein skimmers collection cup still come off? I mean, there's all these things. You have to think about all the pipes coming down from the tank and the valves you have to slow the flow or increase the flow. Will you be able to reach them when you've got other things in the way? And then if you have a refugium and you have a light hanging down, that's a light fixture you have to reach over to twist a knob to do a water change. So you want to kind of really puzzle it all out and see what you can tolerate. I usually recommend that you keep it as simple as possible so that you can do what you're trying to accomplish without being frustrated. If you end up with a sump that has lots of little compartments and lots of different components, and you have to remove 3 things to work on that one thing every single time, odds are you're going to neglect it, and you're going to say it wasn't worth the trouble, it's just too much effort, and I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it next month, or I'll never do it. And you just kind of let it go. And then the tank slowly declines, and then one day you end up ripping all that crap out that's down there that you haven't touched in so long. And then you simplify it. You're like, okay, all I really need is this and this, and wow, my tank's doing so much better now. So I'm basically saying, work with what works space-wise, but leave yourself room to work. And so a lot of times when people come to me and say, like I had a person reach out to me recently, and he had a list of basically, I want every component that exists in the reef hobby in my sump. And I was just like, you're not going to be able to fit all that in there. And I did ask him for dimensions, and I didn't get back to him yet. But, he gave me the footprint of the tank so I could start to, again, try to map out what could possibly fit in there and what won't. But that's what you want to do. And that way you can kind of decide what you like. Now, should you use a sock or not, that's up to you. I don't run socks in my tank at all. But if I need to do like deep cleaning, that day I'll hook up a sock that goes inside a thing I call the sock box. And I change the drains of my tank to make all the water drain into the sock box and dump all that filthy water from me really kicking up a storm in the tank straight into that. It's 2.5-inch drains just gush into that 7-inch sock and catch all the detritus. And then I remove the sock, and then I'm back to I change my drains back to normal Water's going to the skimmer section, water's going to the refugium, and the sock box is disengaged. It's empty. It's just an acrylic box. And for a while there, for like the first year, I didn't have the sock box there. I made it modular to where I could remove it and put something else in there. And the other thing goes in that spot is the Clarity fleece roller system. And that takes up a certain amount of space as well. And I also want to have a spot on my sump for my Trident for the automatic water testing. So all these things grab space. And so you lose inches here and inches there, and then you decide, what can I actually do? And like right now, my big algae turf scrubber that looks like a file cabinet is sitting right on top of where the heaters are located. The only way to deal with those heaters, you do anything with them other than, have them plugged in and turn them on and off, is to remove the entire turf scrubber, remove the entire stand, and now I can clean the area between the baffles. I can clean off the heaters. I can inspect the heaters for any kind of damage to see if they have to be replaced, make sure they're all functional, and that's something I need to do because we're heading into winter, and heaters are going to be even more important now than they are all summer. Hey, Chris, thanks for the live stream, the super chat. And he said thanks for the live streams and happy holidays to you as well. So, no, seriously, thank you very much. Is it safe to use coral dip in a bucket of salt water to soak live rock to help remove pests? It would help kill off Aiptasia. No, I wouldn't do that with any live rock. If you want, no. The answer is no. The live rock, the rock covered with life, may have some pests on it, and you can deal with those individual pests. If it's Aiptasia, you scrape them off. If it's vermitids, you scrape them off. If it's algae, you scrape it off. These are the things you do. If you want it to be dead rock, then you have to do the stuff Dwayne does where he puts it in bleach, and then he pulls it out and he puts it in acid, or maybe puts it in acid first, and then in bleach, and then he has to put it in dechlorinator, and then he has to rinse it, and then finally use it, but now it's dead rock, and you've lost all the benefits of live rock. If you have rock that has some pests, I just remove the pests. I never destroy my live rock. If you have extra live rock, if you have so much that you can do this, you can take your live rock you are not happy with, and you can put it inside a large trash can with a huge pump for lots of flow, and you can take the lid of the trash can and invert it upside down so it's a dome that's doing this. And as the water tries to evaporate out of the barrel, it condenses on the lid and just drips down, and you don't have any water change. You don't have to top off. You don't have to do anything. You just leave it alone and let that pump circulate and leave that stuff just, it's called cooking live rock, and it sits in the barrel for months. Months. 3 months minimum. I used to have a barrel cooking in the back room, and I had rock in there for probably 18 months or 3 years or something, and whenever I needed some live rock, I reached in there and pulled one out, and the rock would be pretty white because it had not had light on it, but it'd be covered in yellow sponge. You could see little amphipods and stuff because some things lived. But I didn't have Aiptasia, I didn't have Mahanos, I didn't have any pests to worry about. I mean, unless you didn't like yellow sponge, but the yellow sponge has never been a problem in my tank. And when I had a rock that was, bad, I would throw that into the barrel and let it cook and pull out one I could use and put in my tank. That's what I was saying. If you have extra, you can do a swap and take some clean live rock and put it in your tank that's still full of good beneficial bacteria, create a support system for your corals, and you can cook the other rock in the barrel and just let it sit there fermenting for months. And you can occasionally change water in the barrel or you can even hook up a protein skimmer that you set in the barrel to help skim out any kind of organics out of that water. And it's a method. Now, if you're really intensely wanting to cook live rock, you would actually have 2 barrels, and you would once a week go into the full barrel, the barrel that's got the rock, and you would shake it off like crazy inside the water that it's in, and put that in barrel number 2, and you fill it up with fresh salt water, move the power head over, maybe a heater if you need a heater for some reason. Probably don't. If the pump's big enough, it's going to heat the water is my point. Like a mag pump will heat the water, and so all you need is that mag pump moving water. And then the old barrel, you would pump that water out, and you'd throw away all the detritus that's in the bottom of the barrel. And then a week later, you would shake all that rock off, and you'd move it into barrel number 1 that's empty and clean, and you put new salt water in there, and you move the pump over again and put the lid on top, and you dump that salt water and detritus away. And that would be, I'm really working hard to clean this rock, and you're doing it weekly. I never did that. I just got it going in the back room and ignored it And occasionally I'd say, oh yeah, let me throw some water in there because the water has evaporated some, and I'll dump in 4 or 5 or 10 gallons of RO water on top. And I didn't care about salinity. I didn't really dwell on it. It just sat there, and the rock would be clean, and it would just have no life on it that you would see and be upset about. Thanks for being here, Aquapuncture. Is she showing off? Brother Gas says, Spock is showing off. I don't have any banana to give her, but I did give her some nori earlier. That's why this clip is here. I've been trying to step up my game, make sure to put nori in the tank more often. Winderwater wants to know which snail species should always be in the tank. The one that a lot of us like the most is the Trochus snail. So the Trochus looks like a turbo or astrea, but if they get flipped upside down, they can be righted. They actually will flip themselves right side up again, is what I'm trying to say. Or if you get an astrea snail, they land on their back and they usually die, or some fish will eat them because they're exposed. And so while we normally buy astreas because they're usually the easiest ones to get, if you're shopping for snails and you have choices, you want to get Trochus. That's your ideal one. Homestead Maker says, can you add live sand right away to a new tank, or do you need to wait for it until after the cycle? To be honest, I've always put live sand in my brand new tank as soon as it was ready. So the tank was up. I put my my dry sand in first. I would add my salt water, and as the water's up a little bit, above the sand, I'd add my live sand on top, and I'd be putting my rock into place. And then within a couple of days, you'd have all this cool stuff all over the glass that came from the live sand, and they basically look like little snowflakes. They're a type of hydroid, a Medusa stage hydroid that hold onto the walls instead of floating around like a jellyfish. And they will be there for a couple of days. You're like, oh, these are so cool. And you can literally knock them off the glass with a cleaning magnet, and they'll just reappear almost instantly. It's really remarkable. And then like 3 days later, like, hey, there's none. Where did they all go? And you have none. But they're part of that, getting things going in your tank. Rogue Gaming says, do you think a 200-gallon peninsula would be big enough for a Nassau tank? Yeah, I think so. Try to get a small one if you can, so it's lots of room initially. And as that tank gets bigger over the years, you may decide, I'm going to a larger tank. I mean, Spock, when I got her, she came with a 280, which was 6 foot long. And then when that tank leaked, she lived in a 100-gallon vat for 7 months. And then she went into the 400. And then 13 months later, the 400 leaked and it had to be repaired. And then she was moved into a 215-gallon tank, which is, again, 6 feet long. 215 gallons, very close to your 200. And she was fine in there. And then after 18 months, the 400 was replaced with a new one. And then she got moved back into this tank. She's been there ever since. All right, guys, I'm going to end it here. I appreciate your staying tuned in this long. There was 113 of you as of right now. I didn't even look earlier where we were at. But today is Water Test Saturday. Please do test your water. We want to know all the things. We don't want to know that numbers are fine. We actually want to know the real numbers. We want to know where our alkalinity lands exactly. And we want to know nitrate, phosphate, calcium, magnesium, potassium, temperature, pH. These are all things that matter. And if you are tracking them somehow in an app like Reef Trace, or you're putting them in a spreadsheet where you can see how you're doing, that would be ideal because you can watch the trends and see how things are going over time. I actually, I checked recently how many times I entered alkalinity into my Reef Trace app this year, and I'm up to 33 times. I wish it was every week. I'd be more proud of myself if I said, because I don't know where we are in the year, but we're in December. So let's just say this is like week 48. I wish I could say I've done it 47 times. That would make me really happy, but I did enter it. Maybe I tested it, it just didn't get put in the app. But I always recommend test your water every single weekend. I always suggest water test Saturday because water tests save lives, according to Caitlin.